The twin suns of Kepler 442b cast long shadows across the pristine crystalline towers that pierced the purple sky. Dr. Velnara's 6 crystalline fingers traced the ancient artifact's surface with reverence and growing excitement. The relic sat on her laboratory table like a sleeping beast, its dark metal surface etched with symbols that seemed to shift and writhe when she wasn't looking directly at them. "This can't be right," she whispered, her voice creating harmonic resonances through her crystalline body. The energy readings on her scanner were climbing beyond anything she'd ever recorded. The artifact wasn't just old, it was impossibly ancient, predating every known civilization in their galactic records. Her assistant, a nervous insectoid researcher named Clixitar, chittered anxiously as his compound eyes reflected the pulsing light emanating from the device. His forearms worked frantically at subsidiary scanners, while his mandibles clicked in distress. "Dr. Velnara, the energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. The quantum resonance patterns, they're not just alien, they're archaic, beyond measure." Velnara had spent 3 decades studying the remnants of dead civilizations scattered across the galaxy. She'd uncovered the burial chambers of the Vorthon Empire, decoded the mathematical poetry of the extinct Lumina race, and even discovered evidence of the mythical builders who supposedly constructed the first hyperspace gates. But this artifact was different. It felt alive, waiting, patient, as only something truly ancient could be. "Look at these symbols," she said, projecting holographic magnifications of the etchings into the air between them. "They're not just decorative, they're instructions, or maybe a warning." Clixitar's antennae twitched nervously. "The quantum dating suggests this predates even the Warbringer legends. Dr. Velnara, perhaps we should contact the Consortium Council before..." "Before what?" Velnara's laugh tinkled like wind chimes. "Before we make the greatest archaeological discovery in galactic history? The Warbringers are myths, Clixtar. Stories parents tell their larvae to make them behave. Be good, or the ancient gods of... War will come for you." She turned back to the artifact, running her fingers along what appeared to be an activation sequence carved into its surface. "This is real science, real history." The moment her finger completed the sequence, the universe changed. The artifact exploded with blinding light that didn't burn, energy that felt older than the stars themselves. The pulse that erupted from it moved faster than light, faster than thought, carrying with it a message that had waited 50,000 years to be delivered. Across the galaxy, on a small blue world in an unremarkable star system, humans called the Milky Way, ancient systems, buried deep beneath Earth's surface, registered the signal. Machines that had slumbered for millennia opened electronic eyes and began the process they had been programmed to execute when the time came. Captain Lee Hyun-woo was reviewing cargo manifests aboard his merchant vessel when the first wave hit him. The Star's Edge was a modest freight hauler, carrying agricultural supplies to the outer colonies, where humans had built their quiet lives. Hyun-woo had been born on New Seoul, raised on stories of Earth as a distant homeland. Their ancestors had left behind for reasons lost to time. The burning started behind his eyes, a sensation like molten metal being poured directly into his brain. He stumbled, gripping the edge of his command console as the ship's bridge seemed to spin around him. But it wasn't nausea, it was memory. Memories that weren't his own flooded his consciousness like a dam bursting. He saw fleets of ships that dwarfed space stations, their hulls black as the void between stars but crackling with energy that could reshape worlds. He felt the weight of command decisions that affected entire species, the burden of being judge, jury, and executioner for civilizations that had forgotten how to solve their problems without violence. Captain Park Min-ho, his navigator, was on his knees beside the navigation console. Blood streamed from his nose as his body convulsed. "Sir, I can see the old war routes, the hyperspace lanes our people used to move battle fleets across the galaxy. They're still there, still active." Around them, the rest of the crew was experiencing similar episodes. Engineer Kim Dal-soo was speaking rapidly in a language that hadn't been heard in 50,000 years, his hands moving across control panels that had never existed on their ship. But somehow he knew exactly what each gesture would accomplish if the star's edge were what it had originally been designed to be. Communications Officer Lim So-jin was receiving transmissions on frequencies that weren't supposed to exist, her equipment picking up signals from automated beacons scattered across human space. "Captain," she gasped between waves of genetic memory, There are things waking up, machines, weapons. They're responding to something." On the agricultural world of New Busan, Kim So-young was tending to her rice fields when the pulse reached her. The simple farmer, who had never held anything more dangerous than a harvesting tool, suddenly found her hands moving with deadly precision as muscle memory older than recorded history flooded her nervous system. She could feel the weight of plasma cannons that had never existed in her lifetime, remember the recoil patterns of weapons that could crack continents. Her neighbor, elderly Park Won-sik, was weeping as he knelt in his vegetable garden. "I remember the last war," he whispered. "I remember why we left. Oh, ancestors, forgive us. I remember what we did to those who opposed us." Across human space, from the mining colonies of the Kepler system to the research stations orbiting dead worlds, the awakening continued. Teachers found themselves able to construct battle plans of impossible complexity. Children began drawing schematics for weapons their peaceful civilization had never imagined. Artists painted images of fleets so vast they blotted out stars. Deep, beneath the surface of every human world, ancient machines stirred to life. Weapons platforms the size of cities began their activation sequences, their artificial intelligences running system checks on destructive capabilities that had been locked away when humanity chose exile over dominion. The peaceful farmers, merchants, and colonists that humanity had become were remembering what they had been before they chose peace. They were remembering why the galaxy had once whispered their name in fear and reverence. They were remembering that they had not always been the quiet species hiding in the galaxy's outer rim. The ancient gods of war were stirring, and the galaxy was about to remember why it had been so quiet for 50,000 years. In the depths of space, automated beacons began broadcasting in the long-dead language of the Warbringers, their messages simple and terrifying. "The inheritors wake. The compact is ended. Let those who remember prepare." The emergency session of the Galactic Consortium had been called at 3 in the morning, Kepler Standard Time. Admiral Thexvar of the Zephyrian Navy hadn't slept in 72 hours, and his normally pristine blue-scaled skin had taken on a sickly pale hue. His 4 muscular arms moved frantically across the holographic interface, pulling up data fragments that his research teams had been working around the clock to decode. The council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from a dozen species watched the displays with growing horror. Ancient text scrolled past in languages that predated their oldest civilizations, accompanied by tactical readouts that defied their understanding of physics. "Look at this," Thexvar said, his voice cracking with exhaustion and fear. He enlarged a particular fragment showing what appeared to be a battle map. "This is from the Zerion archives, sealed for over 40,000 years. It describes a conflict between the Moltec hegemony and the Crystal Dominion that was consuming 3 entire star systems." The other council members leaned forward. The Moltec hegemony had been a legendary warrior race capable of cracking planets with their war machines. The Crystal Dominion had possessed technology that could turn entire solar systems into weapons. Both civilizations were now nothing but archaeological curiosities. The war had been raging for 600 years. Thexvar continued, manipulating the display to show fleet movements that spanned light years. Billions were dying daily. Entire worlds were being sterilized, and then... He paused, his hands trembling as he activated the next sequence. The Warbringers arrived. The holographic display showed a simple scene. A single ship, unremarkable in size, appearing at the edge of the battle zone. Within hours, both fleets, thousands of vessels on each side, had powered down their weapons and retreated to their respective borders. "One ship," whispered Chancellor Velnira, her crystalline form reflecting the blue light of the display. "One ship ended a 6th-century war." "Not ended," Thexvar corrected, his voice barely above a whisper. "Arbitrated. The Warbringers didn't choose sides. They simply had decided. And when they decided, reality itself seemed to bend to their will. On the human colony of New Seoul, Security Chief Choi Jae-min was having the worst week of his career. The colony was supposed to be peaceful, a quiet farming community where the most exciting thing that happened was the occasional dispute over water rights. Now he was watching security footage that made him question everything he thought he knew about physics. The incident had started simple enough. A cargo loader in the main warehouse district had malfunctioned, its programming corrupted by some kind of electromagnetic pulse. The massive robot, designed to move shipping containers, had gone berserk and started attacking anything that moved. Standard protocol called for the emergency shutdown team to respond with stun weapons and containment protocols. Instead, Yoon Da-hae had walked into the warehouse. Jae-min replayed the footage for the 15th time, watching in disbelief as the quiet librarian moved like liquid lightning. The cargo loader's massive mechanical arms swung toward her with enough force to crush a transport vehicle. Da-hae simply wasn't there anymore, having moved with impossible speed to a position behind the robot. "Freeze frame here," he muttered to his deputy, pointing at the screen. The image showed Da-hae's hand touching the robot's central processing unit, her fingers somehow finding the exact pressure point that would cause a complete system shutdown. She disabled a 2-ton security robot with her bare hands. His deputy, a young man named Park Sung-ho, shook his head in amazement. "Sir, I've watched this footage 50 times. She moves like she's predicting what the robot will do before it does it. And look at her face. She's not even breathing hard." But that wasn't the strangest part. When Jae-min had interviewed Da-hae afterward, the woman had seemed as confused as anyone. "I don't know how I knew what to do," she had said, her voice shaking. "It was like someone else was moving my body, someone who knew exactly what that machine was thinking." Similar reports were flooding in from across the colony. The elderly shopkeeper, Mr. Kim, had somehow jury-rigged a broken atmospheric processor, using techniques that shouldn't have existed. Young mother Lee Mi-jin had diagnosed and repaired a critical fault in the colony's defense grid that had been puzzling their best engineers for months. Meanwhile, 3,000 light-years away, the war fleets of the aggressive Kethrak Empire were experiencing something that their warriors had never encountered: genuine fear. Fleet Commander Gextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Blood of Conquest, watching his tactical displays with growing unease. His armada of 800 vessels had been preparing to raid the Outer Rim colonies when something impossible had happened. Ancient defense platforms, older than any known technology, had simply appeared on their sensors. Not built, not deployed, just there as if they had been waiting invisibly in space for millennia. Now they hung in perfect formation around every strategic hyperspace junction, their targeting systems painting every ship in his fleet with lock-on signatures that his best technology couldn't break. "Commander," his tactical officer reported, his reptilian voice tight with suppressed panic, "the platforms are broadcasting in an unknown language. Our translation matrices can't decode it, but the tone suggests they're giving us warnings." Gextar's scaled fists clenched as he stared at the display. The Kethrak Empire had conquered 17 species and absorbed their technologies. They were the dominant military force in this sector of the galaxy. Nothing should be able to challenge them so casually. "What kind of warnings?" he growled. "According to our linguists, something about departure and final notice." "Commander, these platforms, they're not just targeting us, they're targeting our homeworld, our colonies, our entire supply network. Somehow they know everything about our military structure." Back on the Star's Edge, Captain Lee Hyun-woo stood before the ship's main display, watching as buried structures across human space emerged from beneath colony settlements like mechanical flowers blooming in fast forward. The machines were massive, some larger than the colonies they had been hidden beneath, and their hulls bore intricate patterns that matched the symbols from Velnara's artifact. His engineer, Kim Dal-soo, was working at a console that had somehow reconfigured itself overnight. The simple merchant vessel's bridge now displayed readouts that showed the status of defense networks spanning dozens of star systems. "Captain," Dal-soo reported, his voice filled with awe and terror, "these machines, they're not just weapons, Their command centers, strategic coordination nodes for something vast. He looked up, his eyes wide with the weight of genetic memories. We didn't just build them. We built them to work together, as one unified force. Navigator Park Min-ho was studying star charts that showed hyperspace routes their people had apparently used 50,000 years ago. Sir, these pathways, they connect every major population center in the galaxy, not just ours, everyone's. We mapped the entire galaxy and built a network that would let us respond to any conflict anywhere within days. Communications Officer Lim So-jin looked up from her station, where she had been monitoring the automated transmissions flowing between the awakening machines. Captain, I'm receiving response codes from platforms near Consortium space, Kethrak territory, even the neutral zones. They're all coming online, all acknowledging human command authority. Hyunwoo felt the weight of his ancestors' choices settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. The peaceful merchant captain who had been hauling agricultural supplies just days ago was remembering what his people had been before they chose exile. They hadn't just been warriors. They had been the galaxy's ultimate arbiters, the final word in every conflict that threatened civilized space. We built instruments of absolute war, he said quietly, watching as more platforms activated across the display. And then we walked away from them. We chose to be farmers and teachers and merchants instead of gods. But now the galaxy was waking them up, and the ancient gods of war were remembering why they had been feared. Kim So-young had been walking through her rice fields when the ground beneath her feet began to vibrate. At first, she thought it was another tremor from the colony's geothermal plants. But the rhythm was different, purposeful, almost like a heartbeat slowly awakening after a long sleep. The vibrations grew stronger, and suddenly the earth in the center of her largest field began to crack and shift. What emerged wasn't rock or soil, but polished metal that gleamed like liquid mercury under New Busan's golden sun. A section of the ground, easily 50 meters across, rose smoothly upward, revealing itself to be some kind of access hatch. So-young approached without fear, though she couldn't explain why. Her genetic memories, now fully awakened, told her this was safe. This was home. This was what her ancestors had built for her. The hatch opened with a soft hiss, revealing a corridor that stretched down into depths that seemed impossible given the small size of her farm. Emergency lighting flickered to life along the walls, casting everything in a soft blue glow that somehow felt familiar and comforting. "Welcome, Warbringer," a voice said in perfect Korean as she descended. The accent was archaic, formal in a way that reminded her of old historical dramas, but unmistakably human. Harbinger-class war platform Thunderous Dawn has been maintained and ready for 50,237 years, 4 months, and 16 days. The Papish corridor opened into a command chamber that took So-young's breath away. The room was vast, easily the size of New Busan's entire community center, with walls covered in displays that showed tactical information she somehow understood instinctively. Her hands moved across the control surfaces without conscious thought, fingers finding interfaces that responded to her touch like extensions of her own body. "Primary systems online," the machine continued, its voice coming from speakers that seemed embedded in the very walls. "Quantum displacement drives operational, temporal prediction matrices fully calibrated, gravitational lensing arrays ready. For deployment." So-young stared at the main display as it zoomed out from her farm to show New Busan, then their star system, then an entire sector of the galaxy. Hundreds of similar icons appeared across the map, other god machines awakening to their people's call, their locations marked with the same symbols she'd been unconsciously drawing in her notebooks for days. "How many?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. 743 Harbinger-class platforms remain operational across human space, the machine replied. Additionally, 12,000 orbital defense stations, 4,000 mobile command ships, and approximately 2 million automated defense drones await activation. The scope of it staggered her. Her peaceful farming community sat atop an arsenal that could reshape the galaxy, and apparently every human settlement had similar secrets buried beneath their quiet lives. 3 star systems away, Warlord Gextar of the Kethrak Empire was making what would become the biggest mistake in his species' military history. The reptilian commander had built his reputation on swift, brutal strikes against weaker opponents. His fleet of over 1,000 warships had never met serious resistance, and intelligence reports suggested the humans were nothing more than scattered farmers and merchants. "Target the largest settlement first," he ordered his fleet captains, studying tactical displays of the human colony of New Incheon. "Demonstrate our power. Make them understand that resistance is futile." His flagship, the Bone Crusher, led the attack formation as they dropped out of hyperspace above New Incheon. The colony looked exactly as expected, a collection of agricultural facilities and small industrial plants with minimal orbital defenses. A few civilian vessels moved. Between the planet and its single space station, none larger than freight haulers. "This will be over quickly," Gextar growled, his forked tongue tasting the air in anticipation of victory. That's when Lieutenant Commander Shin Bo-ram's ship appeared on their sensors. Bo-ram had been a cargo pilot just a week ago, running supply routes between the outer colonies in her modified freighter, Swift Current. Now she found herself sitting in the command chair of what her ship's computer insisted was a Paladin-class strike frigate, though it looked exactly the same from the outside. "Ma'am," her navigation officer reported, though she could have sworn Park Jin-woo had been her cargo handler last week, not a trained military officer. "Enemy fleet has assumed attack formation. 1,047 vessels, ranging from destroyers to battle cruisers." Bo-ram felt remarkably calm considering she was about to face impossible odds. The genetic memories flowing through her mind showed her similar situations, battles her ancestors had fought against fleets that darkened entire solar systems. This was actually a small engagement by Warbringer standards. "Power up the phase drives," she ordered, her hands moving across controls that hadn't existed on her freighter yesterday, but felt as familiar as her own heartbeat. "Activate predictive targeting, full tactical mode." The Swift Current shimmered and became something else entirely. Its hull flowed like liquid metal, reconfiguring itself into a sleek predator designed for one purpose: ending conflicts quickly and decisively. Gextar watched in confusion as the single human ship seemed to flicker in and out of existence. His targeting computers couldn't maintain a lock as the vessel phased through dimensions that his technology couldn't even detect, let alone access. "All ships, concentrate fire on that frigate," he roared, but his weapons passed harmlessly through empty space where the human ship had been microseconds before. Bo-ram's return volley was surgical in its precision. Her ship's artificial intelligence, awakened after millennia of dormancy, analyzed the entire Kethrak formation in nanoseconds and predicted their movements with perfect accuracy. Beams of coherent energy lanced out from her weapons, each shot calculated to disable rather than destroy. But the effect was devastating. Kethrak destroyers found their engines overloading simultaneously. Battle cruisers lost power to their weapon systems as precisely targeted strikes hit their power distribution nodes. In less than 2 minutes, half of Gextar's fleet was drifting helplessly in space, their crews unharmed, but their ships completely neutralized. "Impossible," Gextar whispered, watching as the human frigate continued its dance through his formation. His tactical officers were shouting conflicting reports. The enemy ship was somehow attacking from multiple positions simultaneously, as if it existed in several dimensions at once. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds. When it was over, every ship in the Kethrak fleet was disabled but intact, their crews alive but thoroughly defeated. Bo-ram's ship hung motionless in space, apparently undamaged despite having faced 1,000-to-1 odds. "This is Warlord Gextar. To all Kethrak forces." The transmission crackled across the battlefield, his voice filled with a fear his species had never known. "Retreat immediately. Do not engage the humans. Repeat, do not engage. The Warbringers have returned." The news spread across the galaxy faster than hyperspace communications should have allowed. Ancient relay networks, dormant for 50 millennia, activated to carry the message that would change everything. Humanity was awake, and they were everything the legends had claimed. On a dozen worlds, species that had been preparing for war, against their neighbors suddenly found more pressing concerns. The Vorthak hegemony, which had been mobilizing to invade Crystal Dominion space, immediately recalled their fleets to defensive positions. The Silicon Collective, a machine intelligence that had been systematically conquering organic worlds, went completely silent and withdrew behind their borders. Even the ethereal consortium, which had considered itself the galaxy's dominant civilization, began emergency sessions to discuss how to approach beings they had thought were myths. The ancient gods of war had returned, and the galaxy was remembering why 50,000 years of peace had followed their disappearance. Admiral Jung Soo-jin had never expected to command a warship, much less one that defied everything she thought she knew about physics. 3 weeks ago, she had been the administrator of a small mining station on the asteroid belt around Kepler 438c. Now she stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, watching displays that showed the positions of fleets across half the galaxy. The ship itself was a miracle of technology that her awakened genetic memories told her was actually quite modest by Warbringer standards. The Eternal Vigil could phase through solid matter, manipulate gravity fields strong enough to crush moons, and move through hyperspace at speeds that made conventional faster-than-light travel look like walking. Yet, according to the ships, Hay-Ide was classified as a medium reconnaissance vessel. "Admiral," called out her tactical officer Lim Tae-hyung, who had been a geology professor just days earlier. Now he moved across his station with the fluid grace of someone who had commanded. Similar positions for centuries, even though the memories weren't technically his own. "We're receiving another surrender transmission. That makes 23 different conflicts requesting Warbringer arbitration in the last 6 hours. Jung Soo-jin studied the holographic display that showed their sector of space. Red icons marked active conflicts, territorial disputes, trade wars, border skirmishes that had been simmering for decades. As human ships moved into position near these trouble spots, the red icons began turning yellow, then green, as opposing forces stopped fighting and requested mediation. "What's the situation with the Mordak-Zelon dispute?" she asked, referencing a particularly nasty conflict that had been raging for 30 years over mining rights to a dead system. "Both fleets have powered down weapons and are maintaining safe distances," reported her communications officer, Commander Park Yoon-ji. "They're requesting a Warbringer representative to oversee negotiations. Admiral, they're offering to accept whatever terms we decide, no questions asked." The ease of it was almost frightening. These were species that had been killing each other for generations, and now they were acting like children who had been caught fighting by their parents. The mere presence of human ships was ending conflicts that the Galactic Consortium had been trying to resolve through diplomacy for decades. The Consortium capital world of Prima Luxus, the emergency council session, had been going for 18 straight hours. The chamber, normally a place of dignified debate, now echoed with the panicked voices of representatives from dozens of species. Supreme Chancellor Mordun, a tall humanoid with silver skin and compound eyes, studied the tactical displays with growing disbelief. Human fleets were moving across consortium space with impunity, but they weren't attacking. Instead, they were positioning themselves at strategic points, hyperspace junctions, trade routes, conflict zones. "Look at these ships," Admiral Thexavar was saying, his forearms gesturing frantically at the holographic projections. "Our best science vessels can't even scan them properly. The energy signatures are off our charts. Each one of those ships could probably take on our entire home defense fleet." Dr. Velnara, still haunted by her role in awakening the Warbringers, manipulated the display to show detailed scans of a human vessel that had positioned itself near the disputed Sigma Draconis system. "The hull appears to be made of programmable matter," she reported, her crystalline voice trembling. "It can reshape itself at will, and these energy readings, they're generating power levels equivalent to a small star." "How many ships do they have?" Chancellor Morden asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Our long-range sensors have detected over 400 vessels so far," Thexvar replied. "But they keep appearing in new locations. Either they have more ships than we can track, or they're moving faster than our detection systems can follow." The truth was even more unsettling. The human fleet wasn't just moving faster than consortium sensors could track. They were moving through dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. Space itself seemed to bend around their ships, allowing them to appear anywhere in the galaxy within minutes. "Chancellor," interrupted Communications Director Vexnala, her tentacles writhing with nervous energy, "we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. The Kethrak Empire has withdrawn all fleets to defensive positions around their core worlds. The Silicon Collective has gone completely dark. No communications, no movement, nothing. Even the Void Hunters have retreated to deep space." Morden felt a chill run through his metallic body. The Void Hunters were nomadic raiders who feared nothing and attacked everything. If they were retreating, it meant the legends about the Warbringers were not just stories. "Send the message," he commanded, his voice heavy with the weight of species survival. "Use the ancient protocols. Request an audience with the Warbringers. Tell them the consortium seeks understanding, not conflict." 3 light years away, Captain Li Hyun-woo received the transmission aboard what had once been his humble merchant vessel. The Star's Edge had undergone a transformation that still made him dizzy to contemplate. What had appeared to be a simple cargo hauler was actually a sophisticated reconnaissance ship designed to monitor galactic civilization while humanity slept. His bridge, once cramped and cluttered with shipping manifests, now displayed real-time information about every major civilization in the galaxy. He could track fleet movements, monitor communications, even predict social and political changes based on algorithms his ancestors had developed over millions of years of galactic oversight. "Captain," reported his communications officer, Seo Min-jun, "the consortium leadership is requesting formal negotiations. They're offering what appears to be complete surrender of their military command structure." Navigator Park Min-ho looked up from his station, where he had been tracking the movements of human ships across known space. "Sir, similar messages are coming in from the Altarian Republic, the Centauri Federation, and about a dozen smaller coalitions. Everyone wants to talk." Hyun-woo walked to the main viewport, staring out at the stars that his people had once ruled. The genetic memories flowing through his mind showed him glimpses of that ancient empire, not built on conquest, but on the simple reality that when humanity spoke, the galaxy listened. "They're scared," he said quietly. "All of them. They remember what we were, even if they don't remember the details." Engineer Kim Dal-soo approached, carrying a data pad that displayed power consumption readings from across human space. "Captain, the God machines are running at minimal power levels, but even that is generating enough energy to be detected across the galaxy. Every sensor array in known space can probably feel them humming." The implications weren't lost on anyone. If the dormant defense platforms were detectable while barely active, what would happen when they reached full power? The answer, according to Hyun-woo's genetic memories, was simple. Reality itself would bend to accommodate their needs. "Sir," Min-jun called out, "I'm receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Jung Soo-jin aboard the Eternal Vigil. She's requesting all senior commanders to attend a strategic conference." Hyun-woo nodded, feeling the weight of decisions that would affect billions of lives. His people had been farmers and merchants, teachers and artists. They had chosen peace over power, quiet lives over galactic dominion. But now the galaxy was asking them to be gods again. The question that haunted him, that haunted every awakened human, was simple. Could they find a way to be protectors without becoming conquerors? Could they use their power to preserve peace without losing the very humanity they had fought so hard to preserve? As human ships continued their silent positioning across the galaxy, every species waited for an answer to a question they were afraid to ask. What did the returned gods of war want with their galaxy? The answer, when it came, would reshape civilization itself. The neutral world of Axiom Prime had been chosen for the meeting because it belonged to no one and everyone. The planet floated in the exact gravitational center of 12 major star systems, its artificial atmosphere maintained by technology so old that no one remembered who had built it. For 50,000 years, it had served as a place where even the most hostile species could meet without fear of treachery. Now it hosted the most important gathering in galactic history. Admiral Jung Soo-jin stood at the head of the human delegation, her uniform bearing no rank insignia or decorations, just the simple black fabric that had become the standard for awakened war-bringers. Behind her sat the commanders who had once been farmers, teachers, miners, and merchants. Captain Lee Hyun-woo, former cargo hauler turned fleet commander. Kim So-young, the rice farmer who now commanded a god machine capable of cracking worlds. Park Min-ho, who had gone from navigation officer on a freight ship to strategic coordinator for an entire sector. Across the vast conference chamber sat representatives from every major power in the galaxy. The ethereal consortium's crystalline delegates reflected the chamber's lights like living prisms. The Zephyrian Navy's Admiral Thexvar kept all four of his arms folded in a gesture of barely controlled anxiety. Even the normally isolated Silicon Collective had sent a representative, a sleek humanoid robot that observed everything with glowing optical sensors. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a blade. "We remember now," Sujin began, her voice carrying an authority that made even the most powerful beings in the galaxy lean forward to listen. "We remember why we left," she gestured, and the chamber's holographic systems activated, displaying images that made several delegates gasp in recognition. The ancient galaxy appeared above them, not the relatively peaceful civilization they knew today, but a nightmare of endless warfare where entire species were consumed by conflicts that lasted millennia. "The Vorthak-Zerion War," Sujin continued, highlighting a sector where two massive fleets faced each other across a field of dead worlds. 800 years of fighting, 17 billion casualties, entire solar systems turned into weapons. The display zoomed in to show planets stripped of their atmospheres, used as ammunition in battles that defied comprehension. "The crystal hegemony crisis," she said, shifting to another part of the galactic map. The hegemony had developed technology that could turn stars into bombs. They were threatening to detonate the core of the galaxy itself rather than accept defeat. Supreme Chancellor Mordun of the consortium watched the displays with growing horror. These weren't just ancient wars, they were extinction events that had somehow been prevented. "How did these conflicts end?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "We ended them," Captain Hyun-woo said, standing to address the assembly. "Every single one, when entire species faced annihilation, when wars threatened to consume whole sectors, when the galaxy itself was about to tear itself apart. They called us." The holographic display showed human fleets moving across the ancient galaxy. Not the massive armadas that other species used, but small, precise forces that ended conflicts with surgical efficiency. A single human ship arriving at Zerion Prime and somehow convincing two warring species to abandon an 8th century war. A handful of warbringer vessels appearing in the crystal hegemony's core systems and preventing the detonation of a galactic superweapon. "You were protectors," observed Chancellor Morden. "You saved countless worlds, countless species. The galaxy owes you everything." "No," interrupted Kim So-young, her voice carrying the pain of awakened memories. "We were killers. Perfect, efficient killers, and we grew very, very good at it." The display shifted to show the aftermath of human interventions. Species that had defied warbringer arbitration simply vanishing from the galactic map. Entire civilizations edited out of existence with such precision that most of the galaxy forgot they had ever existed. "We didn't conquer," So-young continued, her hands trembling as genetic memories of unimaginable destruction flowed through her mind. "We didn't need to. When we decided a species was too dangerous to continue existing, they simply stopped. No battles, no struggles, no last stands. One day they were there, the next day they weren't, and the galaxy was safer for their absence." The assembled delegates sat in stunned silence. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just been powerful, they had been so far beyond any other species that resistance was literally impossible. "Our ancestors made a choice," Admiral Sujin said, her voice heavy with the weight of genetic memory. "They could continue being the galaxy's ultimate arbiters, feared and worshipped as gods of war. Or they could walk away and try to become something better. They chose exile," added Hyun-woo. "They locked away their own nature, buried there, weapons, and retreated to the galaxy's edge to learn how to be human instead of gods. Admiral Thexvar of the Zephyrian Navy spoke up, his 4 arms gesturing nervously. But the locks are broken now. The god machines have awakened. You are what? You were always meant to be. Sujin nodded grimly. Yes. We remember our power, we remember our purpose, but we also remember what we chose to become in 50,000 years of peace. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate. We offer you the Equilibrium Protocol. The terms were elegant in their simplicity. Humanity would serve as the galaxy's final arbiters of existential conflicts. When species faced complete extinction, when wars threatened to consume entire sectors of space, when the galaxy itself stood on the brink of destruction, then and only then would the Warbringers answer the call. We will not rule, Sujin stated, firmly. We will not be worshipped. We will not be your first solution to every problem. We are not your gods, and we refuse to be treated as such. Then what are you? Asked the Silicon Collective's representative, its mechanical voice carrying genuine curiosity. Kim So-young stood again, dirt still under her fingernails from the rice fields she had been tending just weeks ago. We are farmers who remember how to fight, teachers who remember how to kill, parents who remember how to protect. We are human beings who happen to be very good at ending wars. The vote was taken in complete silence. Every major power in the galaxy, species that had been enemies for centuries, civilizations that had never agreed on anything, voted unanimously to accept the Equilibrium Protocol. As the meeting concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, Chancellor Morden approached the human delegation. I have to ask, he said quietly, what happens if you decide we're too dangerous to exist? What's to stop you from doing to us what you did to those ancient species? Captain Hyun-woo smiled, and for a moment his expression carried the weight of genetic memories spanning millions of years. Nothing, he said simply. Absolutely nothing. That's why we're choosing not to. The human fleets returned to their territories as quietly as they had emerged. Across the galaxy, conflicts that had simmered for decades suddenly found peaceful resolutions as opposing sides realized they were being watched by beings who could end their civilizations with a thought. On New Busan, Kim So-young returned to her farm. The god machine beneath her feet had returned to dormancy, its city-sized bulk hidden once again beneath rice paddies and vegetable gardens. She knelt in the rich soil, planting seeds that would grow into food for her community, tending to life, above instruments of death. Her neighbor, elderly Park Won-sik, joined her in the fields as he had every morning for 20 years. So, he said conversationally as he helped her plant rice seedlings, I hear you can destroy entire star systems now. So-young laughed, the sound carrying across the peaceful fields. Only if I have to, she replied, but I'd rather grow rice. Around them, children played in the morning sun, their laughter echoing over farms that covered the greatest weapons ever created. Somewhere beneath their feet, machines capable of reshaping reality slept peacefully, waiting for a call that might never come. The Warbringers had returned to the galaxy, but they had chosen to remain human. And in that choice, they had found something more powerful than any weapon, the wisdom to know when not to use their power. The galaxy was safe, watched over by gods who refused to be gods, protected by warriors who chose to be farmers, guardians, who had learned that sometimes the greatest strength was knowing when to be weak. The end.